Okay, it's recording now.
Are we on air?
Yes, we are very on air. Good
Woohoo!
afternoon.
Good afternoon, namaste, and
Yasu. Or yasas is the plural of that. Excuse me.
yeah, in case you're wondering, namaste is how you greet in Hindi, and
I just said the Greek equivalent.
yeah. So, welcome to the first episode of Uncited. You're listening to Diana, and I'm Natasha.
I'm Diana. In case you didn't notice. So, we started this podcast as struggling, soon to be PhD people.
In biomedical engineering. So, we decided to start off by giving you a glimpse of what it means to be a biomedical engineer
Because it's confusing,
by,
I gotta
obvious-
say.
by obviously drawing on our experience in the field. So, very recently, Diana and I were discussing how the technical nature of our work kind of makes it very unlikely to be a dinner table conversation.
Yes, because once you start talking I guess, biomedical jargon, people like zone out in 3, 2, 1, and they're asleep.
Yeah. So, because there's like, we very rarely find the exact equivalent in everyday speech for jargons. So, it usually ends up leaving them with many more questions. So, today, to address that challenge, we'll be drawing analogies to things that you can relate with to explain what we do for a living. What say?
Or what we will be doing for a living, because we also have to basically clarify that it's much different when you're a biomedical researcher, and it's the point that people usually don't get. They're like, okay, so what do you do? And where will you be able to work in the future? And it's hard to tell really because it's a very interdisciplinary field, and you can go to anything from like getting tenure, continuing in academia, to going full on industry, sales, management. Like there's been a lot of career paths to choose. So let's start with what we know best, I guess, which is research for now. So
Yes.
both Natasha and I are currently working as research assistants, and that is what you do while you're on your way to get your PhD, so that you actually get your stipend and you contribute to your lab's work. So tell us about your research.
Yeah, so my specialty is pharmacoengineering. So I was actually hoping we could start with yours because so we both work on different arms of cancer
Yeah.
treatments. So Diana focuses on diagnosis, so her specialty is imaging, and I focus on treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So
And my field is not only cancer related, but like ultrasound in general. And everyone knows about ultrasound, okay? Like, I can tell my mom that I will work on ultrasound. Of course, the first thing people imagine when you say ultrasound is babies. We do not do babies at all. I've never seen a baby on ultrasound. I've never seen an ultrasound image that I can, like, comprehend. And the funny thing is that you go back home and you're like, oh, what do you do? I do advanced ultrasound. And then people come up with their actual ultrasounds and they're like, how's my liver? And I'm like, dude, that could be a cat, that could be a dog, that could be a liver. Like, I wouldn't know. So it's not, I'm not a radiologist, is what I'm trying to say. And it's very important to, I guess, distinguish that someone working on the technical aspect and programming the scanners and making ultrasound images is something completely different to the medical translation of this. Our job, and my job specifically, is to develop new techniques which can then be used from doctors, from radiologists, from clinics. And using these techniques, we can depict vessels, but using ultrasound. Because ultrasound is usually perceived, like those black and white grainy images that you see while you are at your doctor's office, and they're usually the number one diagnostic tool people use. Why? Because it's cheap. It's much more affordable than an MRI or a CT or a CTA. So We're going to use ultrasound, we're going to find a lump somewhere, and then what they're going to do is they're going to immediately recommend you for a CT, for example. And basically, what I want to do is take the quality of a CTA. CTA is a CT angiography. It's a really cool imaging method where you basically can reconstruct a 3D map of all the vessels that you have in a specific area. It's actually really cool, but the equipment that you use to produce those images is super, super expensive, and we're talking like millions expensive. Whereas an ultrasound scanner can be purchased for as low as $15,000, for example, in a clinic. So my job is to create the technique where using ultrasound plus a contrast agent inserted into the patient's blood, we can kind of make their vessels light up, and then we can monitor them with ultrasound and make a very cool image of, oh, your vasculature in your liver, for example, looks like this. And from that map of vasculature, we can then say, oh, that looks like cancer, that doesn't look like cancer. And that's I guess, a brief description of how we use ultrasound in cancer research. But we're not as in depth as you guys are.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about like what coursework can help prospective biomedical students who would wanna specialize in this specialty. Like what courses could help them? I know you
Yeah.
can definitely make up with coursework later on, but then
You can, and I must admit that my coursework was not the best candidate for my field. I don't know how I ended up in it, honestly. But I'm a chemical engineer by training, so I had, as you understand, lots of chemistry, organic, inorganic, lots of material science, which I'm not really using right now. I think that if you're not coming from like biomedical engineering field as a biomedical undergrad or master's, the most close to what we do would be electrical engineering, just because of the signal processing. So there's a lot of signal processing, image processing,
coding,
again, physics. Sorry.
coding.
Coding, yes. So we only code in MATLAB, which is not hard at all compared to what courses you would take in electrical engineering school. But I think the physiology and the biology and everything, you can kind of catch up.
Yeah, so basically what she's saying is if you don't have a biomed major in undergrad, it's still fine. You can hop into biomed from any specialty that is somewhat related to biomed. It can be basic sciences even. So
Physics, math.
exactly, and you're gonna use a lot of math. I do pharmacoengineering, but I use a lot of math, so don't don't drop that.
Don't drop out of school. Stay in school.
That
Do
is
math.
that's important. Complete your education, no matter whatever career path you take. So, moving on to my research area, which is pharmacoengineering. So, what we do is, if I were to draw an analogy from daily life, it would be Instacart. So, like Instacart prepares your groceries, you place the order online, and then they package your food for you and make the delivery to at your doorstep. So that's what we do with drugs. Now there are plenty of drugs in the market,
Yep.
and very few make it. I mean, there are plenty of drugs that are discovered every day, but very few make it to the market because they fail because of different reasons. And one of the important reasons is the low water solubility of drugs. So, drugs have, especially cancer drugs. Now, how do you discover drugs? So basically, you basically isolate it from natural sources, or you can even synthesize drugs. And then you test them on cells and look at how specific, how selective, and how potent the drugs are. So the drugs are targeted towards targets, and these targets could be either on the cells, on the surface of the cells, or within the cells. And based on that, you would definitely need different delivery mechanisms to make sure that these drugs reach their destination once it's inside the body of the patient. So
But
what?
your like your first, I guess, specimen where you test everything is at the cellular level.
Yes,
Okay.
at the cellular level, and then we move one step up, we work with
Mm-hmm.
small animals, and then we move another step up, we work with large animals like monkeys, and then it's finally clinical trials. But we just cannot skip any of this step. Every
I hope
drug.
you don't. I
Yes.
hope pharma companies don't skip stuff.
Yeah, thank you. We have FDA to thank for that. They make sure that we don't skip any step. So what we do is, we are the Instacart version of drug delivery. So we package these drugs in special packages that make sure that um, the poor solubility of this drug is not a problem when you deliver it intravenously.
Mm-hmm.
And then they make sure that you can even assign certain functionality to these packages and make sure that they do not release the drug or drop the drug on the way to the destination. They make sure that, okay, the drug is only released at its target. So one major side effect of chemo is that there are several side effects,
Yeah.
right? And so people who often have resection, removal of tumors, they opt not to go for chemo considering the side effects. So what this drug packaging can help with is it will make sure that the drug does not wander off to um, non-target sites, and that it's mainly effective at the target site.
And you don't basically you minimize damage done to other healthy tissues because that's a problem with chemo. Like it will destroy cancer all right, but it will also destroy immune cells, healthy tissues, everything on its path, which is why in you see very often in chemo patients, for example, the simplest of symptoms or side effects, I should say, we know is the loss of hair, the
Hmm.
loss of appetite, the vomiting. Like all of that are terrible.
And you are immune compromised, because like you mentioned, chemo drugs, they have the specific property of only working on fast dividing cells, and because your hair cells are fast dividing, your immune cells are fast dividing, these are indirectly affected during chemo.
That is interesting the way you put it because I don't think many people understand like what's the difference between a cell and a cancer cell. I think they view it as a foreign
Mm-hmm.
thing that have entered the body, but it's your own cells. It's like
Yes.
it's part of you.
It's part of you. It's your cell that's gone rogue, and which is why Siddhartha Mukherjee in his book mentions or calls cancer the emperor of all maladies. Rightly so.
It's pretty effective. Like from an evolutionary perspective, it's like a parasitic disease but on steroids. Like it's your own body attacking itself at a
Yeah.
point. And another thing, I was listening to like a lecture from William Lee, who is a researcher on cancer. He mostly looks at how stopping angiogenesis from tumors can help decrease their metastasis levels. And he was saying, and a lot of people have said this actually, that at any given time we have cancer. Like all of us have cancer cells, and it's normal because it just takes a simple mutation of a cell to start dividing like crazy. But 99.99% of the times, your body is able to control that.
Mm-hmm.
So it sends your immune cells, kills it, everything's good. And 99.999, it does not develop into actual cancer. So it's very interesting if you think about it. But right now, like I have cancer cells.
Yeah.
It's it's kind of depressing, but don't worry. Like it doesn't develop as
Yeah.
that most of the times.
That is correct. And genetic predisposition is one factor, but it's not all. And studies have shown that I think a majority of the cases of breast cancer, at least, no one in the family of the patient had breast cancer before. So you would think that, what is making like one member in a family more susceptible to the disease, and unfortunately, we don't have an answer for that yet.
But it's so many factors, like who can pinpoint one of them? But it's interesting because breast cancer is like one of the first things your gynecologist will ask. Is like, do you have any history of breast cancer? And if you do, they're gonna be, I guess, searching you at 6 month increments, as opposed to like the 1 year that I guess women over 25 do. But I don't know. I don't know if I want to talk about prevention in the U.S. because it's not great. At least for cancer, like you really need to put a gun to someone's head to give you all the appropriate tests for a 100% full screening.
That is correct. And sometimes I really wish, as a researcher working on treatment, that if at least half this effort went into prevention, like I think we can go a long way in saving costs for care.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? Like if I were an insurance company, I'd rather not have people go terminal on me and spend money on these super expensive treatments because treating cancer is not cheap. But like, why can't you invest $200 every year or every 6 months on an ultrasound, for example? Like, do scan your entire abdominal area. You can have so many findings that could be either benign tumors or cancers that have just started growing, and if you let them be, because and you know more on this, but cancer is usually asymptomatic in its first stages. It's not like you're gonna be coughing or bleeding or having some extreme reaction so that you can check it. It's just like lurking there and it's growing, and once it's too grown up, you have a problem.
Yeah, and if I'm not wrong, I think about 40% of lung cancer, especially non-small cell lung cancer, is diagnosed when the patient is at stage 4, which is when the cancer has already spread to other organs.
Yeah.
And so the prognosis is really bad. And basically, at that stage, surgery is not an option because how much can you get out?
Yeah,
Right.
true. Like you kind of need your lungs.
Yeah. But I think immunotherapy is like growing strong, and I think that could be.
Yeah, so for the average listener who has no fucking idea what immunotherapy is, like how would you explain it?
Okay, yes. So immunotherapy is basically using or utilizing the immune defenses, your own immune defenses to fight cancer. So basically, you would probably be delivering agents, which are mostly foreign agents. So basically, the body can tell apart, like it can say if it's self or if it's non-self. So if it's non-self, it alerts the immune system, which is basically responsible for surveillance, and then your immune system is activated.
And non-self, for example, just to give an example, are the bacteria
Viruses.
around you, a virus, and the body's pretty good at recognizing that. Because it's like, look, it's an extremely foreign virus that does not contain my DNA. So that's kind of easy. But
And this is again where cancer is a little tricky because it's your
yes.
own cells, and these cells are going to express molecules that are also present in self cells. So, how can the immune system tell apart? So, which is why there are definitely some molecules that are expressed at higher levels in cancer cells than other cells. So that's what you do in immunotherapy. Basically, you feed that to the immune system and tell them to basically go chase cells that are overexpressing these markers.
and how long has I feel that immunotherapy like started getting clinically discussed for the past what, like 10 years? It's relatively new in the clinic. I'm sure people have been researching it like for years on end, but
There has been a growing interest in immunotherapy, and especially after the winning of the Nobel Prize in 2018
hmm
for the checkpoint inhibition. So, for
yeah,
those of
almost
you,
get that one. If it wasn't for those guys, well,
yeah.
next time. Sorry.
So, for those of you who's wondering what checkpoint inhibition is, just like the name suggests, checkpoints, our body has got checkpoints. So basically, if it comes across a cell, say for instance, that is not behaving naturally, there are molecules on immune cells that can engage with these abnormal cells and make sure that they undergo senescence, or another word for that would be apoptosis, which is like
Death.
death, and it's programmed. It's like cell suicide.
hmm
So cancer cells are very smart creatures. Okay, so they can they try their level best to evade the immune system, and they do so by different means, and which is why it's kind of difficult for even immunotherapy to work in certain patients, because the cancer outsmarts the immune system. And so cancer cells, one way they do so is there is this molecule on immune cells which if you bind to, it silences the immune cells. So cancer, of course, would make note of that, and it would exploit that property of immune cells and silence them. So what immune checkpoint, and this molecule is actually called immune checkpoint. So by delivering immune checkpoint inhibitors, it makes sure that the cells are not utilizing this pathway to
Yeah.
silence
So
immune system.
basically, if I'm an immune cell, I see you and I'm like, hey, you kind of look weird.
I
Like, what's
see
your
you,
deal?
and cancers are like, I know you see me, but there's nothing you can do about it now.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, no, no, here's my ID. Like, I'm cool. I'm with you. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, maybe she's cool. That's a very fascinating trick mechanism. And then you get the opposite effect, which is like autoimmune diseases.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, can you just like regulate yourself? What is this? You keep missing cancer, but you're gonna attack your own skin for some reason and get like psoriasis or and so many autoimmune diseases have emerged, I guess, in the last 20 years. I don't know if it's because people are living longer and they're dealing with other nowadays more trivial things like high BP, for example. You have high blood pressure, you just take a pill, you're fine. Back in the day, you had high blood pressure, you most probably would die by the age of 50 from a heart attack. And the longer we increase our lifespan, we
So
get like this new gen of diseases and new cancers and new improved versions of. So basically, nature and nature's games and diseases evolve as we evolve, I guess, and as our means or defense evolve, which is sad, but I guess there has to be some population control.
yeah, one aspect of that, as you mentioned, is definitely people are living longer, and with age, your chances of getting a disease
Yeah.
increases too. But another factor that we should also consider maybe would be that we have better diagnostic tools now. So like several
Yeah,
decades
true.
from now, like we probably there were these diseases were prevalent, but we were just not aware of that. And
Yeah,
it's
and also the gravity of them. Like, imagine you have like syphilis and lupus. Like, who cares about the lupus? You're gonna die of syphilis in 5 months. So, like, it was not clinically relevant at that point.
yeah. And that's one thing to say about cancer too, because many people think that it's a modern disease. It is not. It has been around for like centuries.
That is actually something I've never looked into. Like, when can we pinpoint the first cancers? And I know that in like from what I've read in Victorian times, they did used to have some forms of respiratory cancers, which is the classic, like you hear people coughing up blood and feeling faintish and fatigued, and then all of a sudden, whoop, they would die. And no one knew why, and they didn't really do autopsies back then. They would just, like, I don't know, call the priest, say farewell, and that's it. But there's a lot of cases that do sound like cancer to me
Mm-hmm.
nowadays with a modern understanding of the symptoms.
Yeah, back in the days, it was, I mean, surgery was, I think, the only option. And radical surgery was something that used to be done like very frequently.
And leeches. The
Yeah.
cure to everything? Leeches. Are you feeling fatigued? Why are you being so pale? Here are some leeches to suck up your blood.
Yeah.
Like, what was up with that? Who was selling these? Someone made a lot of money back in the dark ages or whatever from selling leeches.
Yeah, I think people were just apprehensive about diseases in general, and so they were more susceptible to believing what people told them. Because if I'm suffering and if I don't know what other means are there to relieve me of the pain, and if this one person approaches and tells me, oh, it's gonna relieve you of
Yeah.
pain, I most likely am gonna believe it. Because back then we didn't have internet, people couldn't use the Google doctor to diagnose.
Still, the Google doctor is something. I have a headache, and you're like, let's look up my symptoms. Oh, I
And
have a brain tumor. That's always the answer to
that's,
everything.
yes, tumor always is the conclusion for some
And
reason.
I'm like, can I not? And it's probably because I ate spicy food, but Google would tell me it's a brain tumor, so I trust that. And then you get an MRI, and that's why the whole health system is fucked
Yeah.
from people searching Google. No, but in all seriousness, yeah. So cancer is not a modern disease, but even though we have made so many advances in medicine and diagnosis and treatment, it's still a problem. It's up there with like heart disease, which again is a surprise because you'd think that we would have developed like ways of preventing and combating heart disease, but and cancer is second, I think.
Yeah. But definitely the top within the top five leading causes of death. Yeah.
Sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess we haven't found a cure to cancer, but again, going back to Siddhartha Mukherjee, he says prevention is the cure, and I couldn't agree more.
I agree as well. And people, doctors especially, they keep yelling and yelling and saying, if only we had seen you like 5 months prior, we could have saved you.
Uh,
Anyway, let's change subjects. And also, it's been almost half an hour since we've been babbling away, which is
oh wow.
surprising. But just to the main theme of this podcast. So it's not going to be exclusive to diseases or cancer. This is just something that is close to both of our research. So it's, yeah. So it's not only going to be about cancer, we have lots and lots of interesting subjects that we're going to cover. Well, the next episode is kind of going to be about cancer again, but it's mostly about lifestyle choices that you can make and nutrition.
Yeah, so we're gonna cover a little bit about the prevention aspect of cancer. So how you can make informed lifestyle choices and dietary considerations.
Which is a black hole in itself, though, because everyone has so many opinions, and there's plant-based, there's carnivore, there's keto, there's all of these things, but we're gonna try and cover them from like a broader
Perspective.
perspective and more looking at the facts instead of looking at what's the hype or
Yeah, what's he saying
fad
versus what
diets.
exactly. And then we promise we'll have an episode on aging.
Yes, yes. This is one that interests me a lot. So, like reversing aging,
How to stay youthful for long.
getting rid of those wrinkles.
Mm-hmm.
No, not really. It's not about the aesthetics. It's basically about increasing your lifespan as much as
Yes.
possible, which would be cool.
Yeah, there have been studies on people who have like lived beyond 120 years.
Yeah.
So it's probably maybe a good starting point for us
Mm-hmm.
to find out what their lifestyle was.
And do exactly that, because I really want to be 125. That'd be awesome. Or
Yeah.
not,
Or not.
depending on what the world is going to look like by 2000
True.
whatever.
If it's habitable, if Earth is habitable.
Yeah, we'll go someplace else, which is another good topic for
Yes.
another time. Space traveling.
Yes, and if you guys have any suggestions, feel free to reach us at theuncited@gmail.com.
Also, you can send us ideas on our personal Twitters. I personally made a Twitter just for this. You are welcome. It's at Diana Sulioti, which is my name.
And mine is Natasha V1. So feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. We are also on LinkedIn.
Yeah, again, I'm Diana Sulioti. I'm always Diana Sulioti.
And I'm always Natasha Vinod.
So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for spending this half an hour of your time with us.
And since the clock has been set back, you can definitely spare.
Yeah, use your extra. Did you get an extra hour or an hour
Today,
less?
it was like in at 2 a.m. on Sunday.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, give us your spare hour.
Yeah, and learn something about science, interesting. And this is something like the format is such that you can even listen to us during your commute, so you don't have to basically be at in front of a screen or anything.
Oh, yes. Again, thank you so much for your time. See
Thank
you on
you.
the next episode, and happy election day, by the
Happy
way.
Election Day, and if you haven't already done so,
Yeah, yeah. Go and vote if you're in the US, because if you're in different countries, this is irrelevant. But
yeah.
all right. Have a great day, night, evening, whatever.
Bye bye.
Bye bye now.